story of the long and distinguished career of Raj Chandra Bose is one of the most interesting in the history of the development of statistics in the 20th century. The struggles and successes of the early years are closely related to the rise to prominence of the school of Indian statisticians. The extraordinary output in the middle years coincides with the explosive development of statistics in the United States after the Second World War. The return to pure mathematics in the later years represents a unique reversal of roles in which concepts originated and worked out in statistics contribute to a broader understanding and more powerful methods for the modern development of finite mathematics. 4 interviews of Professor Bose by Professor Roy Keebler from the University of North Carolina were recorded in September 1981 at Colorado State University, resulting in a 4-part program. Part 1 is devoted to the early years, which coincide with the development of the Indian Statistical Institute and the Department of Statistics at the University of Calcutta. Part 2 includes the story of Bose's central role in the development of mathematical theories of experimental designs and information codes, which took place during the middle years. Part 3 covers the later years, in which ideas from designs and coding theories were adapted to studies in the theories of graphs and projective geometries. In the final section, in Part 4, Professor Bose recalls his associations with famous contributors to statistics and mathematics and discusses some of the philosophical issues of his life and experience.
Professor Raj Chandra Bose, lots of people will thank you for this interview because of their interest in you and your career and your work, and for the always possible hints as to secrets of success. To begin at the beginning, would you tell us something about your father's and mother's families?
My father came from the Bose family at Kolshini, which is a small town near Chandanagar, which was then a French possession, about 30 miles north of Calcutta. He was the youngest of his brothers and sisters, my uncle being about 2 years older than him, and the 2 sisters much older than him. My mother's family came from my mother's family was in Hoshangabad, Madhya Pradesh, which used to be called Central Provinces at that time. My maternal grandfather had emigrated there and was in the British service.
I see. That was a very good background, one would say. Your father was a military physician, was he not?
Yes, that came about in a very peculiar manner. Both the husbands of his elder sisters were working for the British in different places. The elder sister husband was in the town of Rohtak, in the present province of Haryana,
I see.
about 40 miles from Delhi. Haryana used to be in Punjab at that time. And the other sister's husband was in Hoshangabad, at the very place where my mother was. And he was also doing some work for the British. You know, as the British advanced westwards, they originally had conquered the coastal provinces of India.
Yes, sure.
And new jobs opened up for people, and they followed there, more especially from Bengal and from southern India. Now my father and my uncle lost both their fathers and mothers after the sisters had been married.
I see.
And therefore my father and mother, my father and his uncle both went to Rohtak to live with the elder sister.
I see. Yeah.
And thereafter completing his education, my father sat for a competitive examination to enter the Lahore Medical College of the Punjab University.
I see.
And he succeeded in this competition. There were 20 scholarships, but they were meant for people who were to serve in the British military service for a specified amount of time.
I see.
That was the condition of these
Yes.
scholarships.
Yes.
So after serving his time in the British military, fighting in the Second Afghan War and in the Burmese wars, he came back and he settled down in Rohtak again as a private practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Hoshangabad to see his other sister, and where he married my mother,
I see.
Ushangini Mitra. I was the first child of this union, the eldest son of the family, born on June 19, 1901 at my mother's house.
I see. The beginning of a dynasty, one might think. How many brothers and sisters had you?
I had one brother and three other sisters. My brother was born in 1905 and then followed the other sisters in 1907, 1910 and 1914 respectively. All of them born at Rohtak,
That's very good.
where my father continued his private medical practice until he died.
Mm-hmm. Was there mathematics in your genes?
Well, I cannot say that there was mathematics in my genes, but there were a number of quite good scientists in the Bose family. For example, S.N. Bose, the famous Bose, famous for his Bose-Einstein statistics,
Oh, really?
and Sir J.C. Bose, the famous botanist. And there were a number of other minor scientists, but I don't remember any mathematician.
Well, you started the line. Was mathematics your favorite mental activity as a very young child?
No. But I was quite good at it. Whatever came, I took in my stride, but I had no special interest in mathematics, vis-a-vis other subjects.
When did your interest in mathematics really begin?
My interest in mathematics really began in my B honors in mathematics
Oh, I see, in college.
in college.
Uh-huh. You once mentioned the very high standards that your father had for you in school. I've often wondered, did this oppress you in any way? Or, on the other hand, could you credit it in any significant degree for pushing you to excellence?
Well, my father expected me to be at the top of my class in every subject. English, mathematics, physics, chemistry, anything that was taught in school. At one time, it happened that I was second in geography. I was first in every other subject. And he said, "So why are you second in geography this time?" I said, "Well, sir, this other boy got just a couple of marks above me." And he said, "Bring your geography book." I brought it and he said, "Now you have to get this book by heart." It was about a 200-page book. And in about a month or so, I had the whole book by heart from beginning to end. I have a photographic memory which I inherited from my father. At that time, I didn't think it anything peculiar because my father could do it too. But normally, I was good in everything, and I was at the top of my class in every subject.
You can break out into long quotations in the Sanskrit, and you've read very deeply in philosophy and history. How was your education divided between mathematics and other subjects?
Well, there are 10 grades, used to be 10 grades in Indian schools at that time, at the end of which there was this matriculation examination. This was a general thing, everybody had to go through it. For example, my subjects in the matriculation examination were English, mathematics, history, geography, physics, chemistry, and Sanskrit.
I see.
Then I went on to college, and here is where my interest in Sanskrit really began, because, you know, it was the time of independence movement against the British was just starting.
Now, this was 1919.
1919. Gandhi had just come on the scene. Before that, the policy of the British, the policy of the Indian people who wanted independence were to present petitions to the British. Gandhi said that I want to make direct action. And people wanted their identity. In our college, it was a denominational college, Hindu college. We were taught the principles of Hindu religion and the more important scriptures. Lectures were given on a voluntary basis, but there was no examination. We also had a society of our own in which we studied these things ourselves. And having a good memory, I remember what we did at that time.
And that was in your first 2 years at college?
Yeah, and that was during my first 2 years.
I see. Then you had an intermediate exam.
Yeah, then we had an intermediate exam. My subjects for the intermediate exam were English, mathematics, physics, chemistry, and Sanskrit.
I see. And
I can still quote from my Sanskrit textbooks. The poetry book in Sanskrit was Kalidas's Kumar Sambhav. And I can quote practically chapter and verse from this book.
Really? But then then you went in for mathematics at the end of the college
time, right? At the end of the intermediate, yes.
Yes.
At the end of the intermediate 2 years, there was an exam, and I stood first in the university in this exam. And then I had to decide what I want to specialize in for honors. And I could either have specialized in physics or in mathematics, but there was no good department of physics. The professors of physics in Delhi had no good name.
I see.
The professors of mathematics were good. So I decided to take mathematics.
I see. And then...
And I discovered that I had a good aptitude for it.
Yes, well, you had the right idea there, I think, as things turned out. Well, your progress through higher education was not a very simple, direct process because of the deaths of your parents and you're having to take over as head of the family. How did you manage this?
Yes, my mother died even before I passed the intermediate examination in the war influenza of 1918. which was a pandemic. It was here in this country too, everywhere. And after the death of my mother, my father passed away after 15 more months. By that time, I had passed the intermediate examination, which gave him great satisfaction because I was #1 in the university and won the university scholarship and the university medal. But we were left orphans. And my brother was in the last year of school. So I left my brother and two of my sisters. The other sister's marriage had been arranged already by my father before he died.
Mm-hmm.
With my cousins, who gave them room and board in lieu of staying rent-free in the house that my father had built in Rohtak.
Ah.
After 1 year, my brother passed the matriculation examination and won a scholarship. I already had a good scholarship, and I moved my family to Delhi. We sustained ourselves on just coaching students. The four of us, I, my brother, and my sisters, used to live in the house of one of my students whom I was coaching. They gave us this a room and a sort of balcony which we converted into a kitchen, and we shared their bath with them, with the family of my student.
And that
at the end of practically near the last days of the BA Honours, my BA Honours exam, 1922, our coaching jobs expired, and also, though I was quite sure that I would win a scholarship,
yeah.
but it takes about 2 months to declare results. So it seemed that we were going to starve. 1 month we tided over by selling some medicines, a bottle of quinine left from my father's dispensary. Quinine was very scarce at that time in the aftermath of the war and fetched a good price. But we were providentially saved. The day my examination, BA Honours examination was over, I found a note from the Mission College, Calcutta, from the Mission College, Delhi.
Yes.
From the Mission School, Delhi.
Okay, yeah, it was that.
To go and interview the headmaster, chief of the college, chief of the school. And he said that they had a temporary job for a teacher of mathematics because one teacher of mathematics had taken leave for a year. So he looked at me, my clothes were shabby, and he advanced me half pay. He said, come and join us from next month and get a good suit for yourself. So
that was a good beginning, at least.
Yes. And so I did this. I taught in the school for 1 year, and the college allowed me to join the master's program. I could not attend all the courses because I had to teach in the school, but those courses which I could attend, I did attend. At the end of 1 year, this job ended, and we managed to live on the scholarship that I duly won the scholarship also. My brother also won a scholarship, and so on our scholarships and coaching students. we lived.
Mm.
But in I took applied mathematics again, because even though I liked pure mathematics, but there was no good program of pure mathematics in the University of Delhi.
I see.
It was at Lahore. It was 300 miles away, and I couldn't afford to go there and take my family there. I didn't know what's going to happen.
But you did pursue right through, in 3 years, as a matter of fact, after the B honors, you had your master's degree in applied math, right?
2 years after.
2 years.
2 years. I took 3 years for my honors.
Uh-huh.
And then after 2 years, in 1924, I had my degree in applied mathematics.
And what did applied mathematics imply in those
Applied
days?
mathematics in those days implied our subjects were statics, dynamics of a particle and a rigid body, potential theory, hydrostatics, hydrodynamics, and astronomy. These were the compulsory papers. And one had to take 2 optional papers. For my optionals, I took electricity and magnetism. So it was something like mathematical physics.
Oh, yeah, this is mathematical physics.
Yes. We had a Jean's book in electricity and
Really?
magnetism.
Yeah.
A very difficult book,
Yeah.
with lots of examples, Cambridge type examples, you know what kind of.
Yes, I know.
Yes, you must remember that when I was a school and a college student, the British Empire seemed like a permanent empire in India, and everything had to be in English. From grade 9 we had to answer every question, whether it be in history, in geography, or in any other subject. Even if a question is asked from Sanskrit, we will have to translate Kalidas from a Sanskrit into English.
I see. Well, this was you had a pretty rough time there trying to educate yourself and also run a family. So you were really ready for a stroke of good luck that made it possible to go off to Calcutta to the university for pure mathematics.
Yes, it happened like this. After my MA examination, I tried to find a job in Delhi, but it was very difficult to find a job without any influence. And in the MA examination in applied mathematics, I did well, but not so well as I should have, because I was too busy coaching students and having all these other difficulties, so I couldn't devote as much time to my studies as I should have. And there was no job, so we sustained ourselves just both by coaching students. And I was coaching the younger brother of one very rich Marwadi gentleman, Seth Kedarnath Goenka. This is a student of mine. He was smart, but he was very lazy. I made him work hard, and he did quite well in his examination. Mr. Goenka was very pleased with the performance of my student, and he said, "Look, Bose, I don't care for money. You have done very good for me, and I am prepared to help you in any way you like." I said, "Sir, if you are really prepared to help me, I want to study pure mathematics, and Calcutta is one of the best schools in pure mathematics. Can you send me there and pay my dormitory expenses and my tuitions?" He said, "Yes, as long as you need it, I will pay it."
Wonderful.
And he sent me to Calcutta, and I joined the University of Calcutta.
Pure mathematics.
In pure mathematics.
Now, what was pure mathematics in 1925?
Pure mathematics in 1925, so far as the university was concerned, was algebra, not the modern algebra of rings and fields, But crystals algebra, inequalities, continued fractions, things like that,
Yes.
theory of equations, analytic geometry, solid geometry, differential geometry, analysis of real and complex variables.
Oh, pretty pure.
And calculus of variations.
Calculus of variations at
Yes,
that time.
these were the compulsory subjects.
Yeah.
And one had to take then 2 papers, optional. One could choose group theory, one could choose advanced geometry, one could choose elements of statistics or anything. I was good in geometry, I chose geometry. And the special papers in geometry consisted of 1 paper, n-dimensional geometry of real space,
Mm-hmm.
and the second paper consisted of non-Euclidean geometry.
Non-Euclidean geometry then.
Yes.
Very good. Why? How come you picked geometry as your special field?
Well, during my BA honors, I had discovered that I like geometry, and I did very well in the geometry paper in my BA honors. And there was a famous professor, not the head of the department, Dr. Mukherjee, who was very good in geometry.
So this was at Calcutta.
At Calcutta. Yeah. And so I attended his classes for these special papers. It fell out that he took a liking to me because I used to ask intelligent questions. And he said, now, but he asked me about my history. I said, I am an orphan like that. Of course, at this stage, I must tell you that I left my sisters in Delhi with my brother. My brother passed his BA examination that year, and he did quite well, and then he got a job in this same school in which I had taught temporarily for 1 year, so he could take care of my sisters. So Dr. Mukherjee said, well, you needn't take any help from this Marwadi gentleman. I will get you on free tuition, and you live in my house, and I'll get you a nice coaching job. So he got me a nice coaching job next door.
Yeah.
So that I didn't even have to walk to go to teach the student, and he got me free tuition in the university, and food was free. He had a very nice library in his house, so I didn't have to buy any books.
Well, that was a wonderful arrangement.
Yes, he was a very nice gentleman. Almost every year he had some student with him until he saw him through. This was one of his hobbies, to pick up good students and make their career.
Yeah. Now, what was geometry in those days? What were you doing in this?
Well, besides non-Euclidean geometry, which was one of his favorites, the topology was just beginning, but actually the geometry, Hilbert's Grundlagen der Geometrie, Hilbert's Foundations of Geometry, Klein's geometry from the elementary mathematics from the higher point of view, Klein's icosahedron, Blaschke's affine differential geometry, conformal differential geometry, and there used to be something called the geometry of webs, which geometry der Geweben, Blaschke was a German.
Yes.
Which has now been more or less absorbed in the topology of fiber bundles.
I see. You had said that you learned the spirit of research from Professor Mukherjee quite a lot.
Yes.
What were the frontiers then?
Well, the frontiers was just what I have told you.
At the edges of all
Yeah,
these?
at the edge. He told me that topology is now beginning to be an important subject.
Yes.
And if you want to remain a mathematician,
Yeah.
you will have to study topology and become a good topologist. But topology was rather in a rudimentary stage at that time, you know. We are speaking of 50 years ago.
You had a 2-year research associateship with Mukherjee, and that expired at an unfortunate time, it seemed to me, December 1929,
Yes,
just as the Great Depression was setting in.
just as the Great
Now that certainly must have made a new crisis.
Yes, it made a great crisis. I want, when it expired, I tried to find a job, and wherever I would go, they would say, well, you are overqualified. You won 2 gold medals in your exam in the M exam of the Calcutta University, and you have 2 different master's degrees. You are overqualified for us. You are not going to serve us for the salary that we can offer you. And ultimately, with some difficulty, I landed a job in Asutosh, Calcutta.
I see. Asutosh College, was it a college?
It was a 4-year college.
Yes.
And began to teach there. I had to teach very elementary subjects. The salary was low. I had to subsist, teach college during the day, and then do some coaching at night.
Busy.
Yes, busy all the time. But I still kept up my research in subjects which I had started under Dr. Mukherjee.
Yeah. Well, it seemed,
Though this research was not too good, but still it had important consequences.
well, it seems to me, though, that you had a lot more of to do with hands-on teaching, tutoring, lecturing the students, coaching, than is customary in the upbringing of a research mathematician. Do you think this was especially valuable in developing your good level of exposition and your expertness at guiding graduate students?
I was a good teacher from the very beginning. Teaching is in my blood. Even when I was a school student, there was an unwritten compact between me and the other students of my class that if they didn't understand anything, they were always free to come to me to ask me, and I would explain it to them. And so that had nothing to do. My father wanted to make me a doctor in his tradition.
Sure.
But I said, well, sir, I want to be a professor. And I did. But coaching students helped me in one manner, because everybody had to take 2 special papers. So if somebody had taken group theory, I normally used to teach master students. If somebody had taken group theory, I wouldn't say no. I would study group theory and teach him. If somebody had taken statistics, I wouldn't say no. I would just study statistics and teach him statistics. So in this way, my coaching jobs gave me a broad outlook over mathematics. To that extent, it has helped.
You know, the story of how you came into statistics from just pure mathematics, I think, is one of the greatest stories in the profession. Tell us how that came about.
Yes, it came about in this manner. I had just married, and a few months after that, to be exact, in December 1932, my servant came and said that a very important gentleman has come in a car to see you. Cars were very rare in India in those days, and anybody who possessed a car was really a great man. I found that this professor was the famous statistician P.C. Malanovic. He told me, Bose, I had founded the Indian Statistical Institute last year, 1931, and I want a good geometer because Fisher is using n-dimensional geometry methods in his work, and nobody in my laboratory understands it. Now, n-dimensional geometry was one of your special papers. I have gone through the careers of the good students who have come out of the Calcutta University during the last 4 or 5 years, and I find that you would be the most suitable for my purposes. So why don't you join the institute? I want to give you a try. I don't want you to leave the college right now, but I would give you a half-time appointment. Since you don't have to teach on Saturdays, and my institute remains open on Saturdays, therefore you come on Saturdays and during the college vacations, because we are never closed. And during the summer vacation, he would go to some mountain resort. So in 1933, we moved to Darjeeling, and he provided a house for me and my wife. And the second day after we had moved, I found all the volumes of the biometrical, starting from the beginning up to the current volume, and a list of 50 typed papers. The headings only.
Yeah.
And Fisher's book, Statistical Methods for Research Workers.
Mm-hmm.
The other book on design of experiments had not yet been written. And when I went to see him, he said, well, now you master these 50 papers and master Fisher's book, which was a tall order because it's a difficult book. And that would be quite sufficient for the present. After that, every year, after one, there is another thing here. After 1 year, he took S. and Roy on the same terms as he took me.
I see.
So we were the two mathematicians in the institute. And every year, he would move to a hill station, and one subject will be chosen. Inference 1 year, design of experiments 1 year, multivariate analysis 1 year, and so on. And he said it is the duty of you and Roy to read all the important papers in this particular subject and give lectures to the other junior people in the laboratory. He would himself sit on this. Even though he didn't know everything, but we couldn't do any hanky-panky. He was intelligent enough for that. If we made any mistake, he said, no, this I don't understand.
I see. And then you'd have to make it clear.
So we had to prepare carefully. And in this way, in a few years, we got well-grounded in statistics, both of us.
I should think so. Self-taught, but pretty well taught, because research papers by you and Mahalanobis and Roy began appearing very soon.
Well, he was interested in anthropology in this, that he wanted to differentiate between various aboriginal groups in India which had remained even after the alien invasion. And he went to the field, he had all the measurements, and he had created an index which is now known as Mahalanobis's d-square.
Yes.
And he wanted the distribution of this d-square. I mean, in 1934, I succeeded in finding the distribution of the classical d-square. The classical d-square means that the variances and covariances are known.
I see, yeah.
He was not satisfied by this.
No.
He said that, well, I have only samples. We don't know the variances and covariances. So you find the distribution for this case, the studentized case. Roy and I discussed this among ourselves. And we soon realized that unless we have a better handle on Wishart's distribution of the correlation coefficients and variances,
Yes.
nothing is possible. So we used Fisher's geometrical method and introduced the idea of what we then called rectangular coordinates, P coordinates and L coordinates. The distribution of the L coordinates came out all independent of one another, either normal or chi-square. And once we had this, then we used further geometrical methods to get the studentized distribution.
And a great, great thing it was. Now, another very dramatic thing occurred about that time. You know, the emigration of German talent during the Hitler years is one of the very important parts of the history of science. And about that time, as dramatic a piece of this history as any, I think, was the arrival of Friedrich Wilhelm Levy.
Yes.
As your head of the math department, right?
Right. The head of the math department suddenly died. He had a heart attack. And Professor Levy, Friedrich Wilhelm Levy, he became the head of the department in the University of Calcutta. I was already in the institute by that time, because Mahalanobis got 2 federal posts created, one for me and one for S.N. Roy, and we gave up the Asutosh College and moved 100% to the institute. He had done enough testing and he was satisfied with us that these are good people.
Yeah.
But when Professor Levy came, I started going to the seminars he was giving. He wanted to change the syllabus because he found the syllabus of the Calcutta University very old-fashioned. And especially he wanted to introduce the modern algebra, which was called modern algebra at that time. It is no longer modern.
Yes.
The algebra of rings, fields, modules, ideals, things like that, and finite geometries. The professors at the university, they said, now this German has come and he wants to learn all these new things. It's terrible. So Levy told me that, look, I am writing a book on finite geometry and I am writing a book on algebra, and my English is not good. You correct the proofs, and if you don't understand it anywhere, you ask for my help, and I will give you a part-time job in the University of Calcutta to teach some of these subjects.
I see. And that's what you did.
That's what he exactly did.
Yes, while all your duties and studies and research inventions were going on, you weren't exactly a recluse. One particular example of that would be that you were married just before you went to the Indian Statistical Institute. And I and countless other people can attest to the success of that venture, now within 1 year of its golden anniversary. I think you'd say your marriage to Sandhya Lata Datta was a marriage made in heaven. To what extent can you take credit for bringing that off?
Well, not too much credit. You know, in India, marriages are arranged. It is the duty of the father of a girl to find a proper husband for her.
Uh-huh.
Now, her two sisters, two younger sisters, were my students
Oh.
at Asutosh College, where I had landed a job, as I told you before.
Mm-hmm.
And they must have told the father of my wife that there is an eligible young bachelor. And my father and mother were dead, so I was living at that time in a part of the house of one of my cousins, paying rent to him. And so they had to negotiate with him instead of my father. Before my marriage, I only saw my wife just for 1 day,
I see.
according to the
Yep.
Indian custom.
Certainly worked out well that way, I'd say. And you and Sandy reared a very fine family of 2 engaging daughters, Probi and Shipra. Now, outside of your family, I think the best evidence that you have not been a recluse certainly must be your dedication to travel. I remember you telling me once an associate had said to you that your chief degree that you should sign ought to be DT, Determined Tourist. Family and tourism have been enjoyable and refreshing intermissions to your research work. But I judge you didn't have the same opinion about administrative activities. You were a department chairman in India, weren't you? And you were offered another one. What was that like?
Yes, I have to go back a little. In 1940, Professor Levy offered me a position in the University of Calcutta in the Department of Mathematics, and it was a very advantageous offer. As I had already told you, I was working full-time in the institute and part-time in the University of Calcutta.
Yes, yeah.
He offered me a salary equal to the sum of both, and gave me a lecturership in the Department of Mathematics. I worked there for about 18 months. But Mahalanobis didn't want me to leave statistics.
No.
So he got a graduate department of statistics created in the University of Calcutta, of which he became the head. I and S.N. Roy, the 2 lecturers, and Mahalanobis was head only in name. All the work of setting up the department, drawing up the courses, getting it started, fell on me. Then in 1945, when Mahalanobis retired, I became the head of the department. And I was there up to 1947 till I was invited as visiting professor to the United States. And during this time, I found that these administrative duties were really taking too much of my time, and I was not able to do too much work. There are a number of papers written during those times, but all of that had already been worked out actually before the department started
Yeah.
in my head.
So I guess it was the chance to really stick to research that was decisive in making you make up your mind to move to the United States. You had a sample of statistics in the United States during your visiting professorships in 47-8.
I went back after my visiting professorship and stayed in India about 7.5 months. Melanovich offered to make me the assistant director of the institute, and as Professor Levy had retired, he had recommended that I be made the Hardinge professor in the University of Calcutta and be the head of the Department of Mathematics. But I liked the United States much better because I found that internal politics was not so severe here as in India.
Very good.
You have always in India to keep in good terms with the president and with the deans and everybody. Here you go about your own work and don't have to do that kind of thing.
I see. Did the move live up to your expectations?
The move lived to my expectations, certainly. I stayed at Chapel Hill for 22 years, even though I received many offers. They were perhaps the most productive years of my life and very happy years of my life.